Okay, I think we'd like to get started. I don't know if everybody's here. We'll probably still have some stragglers. By the way, we still have some seats if there's some people that want to sit down, but we do have a second screen as well. But there are a few seats that are left. I know some people just like to stand, but there are a few seats. Welcome and thank you for coming tonight. I'm glad we're getting such a big crowd like this. I like it when digital media folks and people related to them meet up for meetings like this. My name is Donaldson. I think a lot of you know that. I'm the president of DigiBC. We're the Industry Association for Digital Media and Wireless Companies, UBC. And we try to put on entertaining, interesting events, and I think this is going to be, I'm actually really looking forward to this event. I think it's going to be very exciting, and I'm looking for a lot of interaction because I know a lot of you have some experience in this and a lot of questions, and I hope you can ask your questions. We can have a really good dialogue on this because I know that this is a really key challenge. How many people do they feel that they're being challenged by the new business models and having to monetize and acquire users and engage users, which you really didn't have to deal with before and you didn't really have to integrate in your design? Just raise your hands if you're being challenged by that. Okay, so a fairly large number, as I would have expected. And I like tonight's title, Moneyball. I just think it's so apropos for this event, the art of monetizing video games with Playnomics. I don't know how many people know who Playnomics is. So they're a San Francisco-based company. They're a global leader in quantifying play behavior. They don't really develop games. They're more of a data analytics and predictive analytics companies that work exclusively with video game companies. Now they can also do the same sort of thing for companies that are outside of video games. It's just that they focused on video games and they have over 100 million users who've actually been on their system. So they have a lot of experience in this field. So we're very fortunate to have Playnomics here tonight. And I want to thank the Playnomics team for coming up here tonight. We have 8 people from the Playnomics team, and they'll be introducing some of their people here in Vancouver today. And they are sponsoring this event. This is why we were able to offer this for free. And the BC government, who you may not know, hopefully you do, the Ministry of International Trade is sponsoring this event as well. And Richard back there with the tie on is our friend. So please feel free to introduce yourself to him. I'd also like to thank the people who actually have to put this event together behind the scenes, who we generally don't think of. And one of the people, Whitney, are you here? And Carly? Can you just raise your hands? Okay, well, anyway, I'd like to really thank them and acknowledge them for putting this event on, because there is a lot of effort that goes into it. I mean, I just show up and it seems really easy, but I know there's a lot of effort to it. We have, after this presentation, we have pizzas that will be coming in, and we'll follow it up with networking and exchanging business cards and really whatever you want to do. So I'd just like to, we have 4 very impressive speakers coming tonight, so I just wanted to give a brief background of the 4 speakers who will be talking. So first of all, we have Chethan Ramachandran. He's the CEO and co-founder of Playnomics. Before that, he spent 3 years as a partner of an investment fund where he structured, launched, and ran new technology joint ventures. Prior to that, he was part of a founding team and director of business development for a venture-backed predictive analytics company for security. So he has quite a bit of experience in this field. Next, we have Jay Cohen, who's Chief Revenue Officer for Playnomics. Jay is a very seasoned video game executive. He previously was VP of production for Bruckheimer Games, and before that, I spent 13 years as a senior VP with Ubisoft. and his team was responsible for such games which I know you'll recognize, such as Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon, Prince of Persia, Rayman, Assassin's Creed. I think probably you've heard of some of those titles. And he's also served on the board for the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. Next we have Brendan Burke, who's a data scientist with Playnomics. He does all the technical analysis, and he works with their clients to help them with user engagement and helping them to analyze their data and manage their user base. And next we have Alain Tascan, who's CEO of Sava from Montreal. Again, he's another veteran video game person, which I think probably some of you have worked with. He actually has been a founder and a key executive with 3 major studios, Ubisoft Montreal, Ubisoft New York, and EA Montreal. So we have a very seasoned team, and they're going to come up here and blow you away with their knowledge and intelligence, and you're going to ask very good questions, and we're going to learn a lot from it. I'll let them take the presentation away. Thanks a lot.
All right, hey guys, I'm Jay. Nice to see you. This is awesome. And we were talking before, like, who's going to come to this thing? And I think just seeing everybody here and seeing the seats filled kind of reinforces a bit of the validation with what's going on in the marketplace right now, free to play. We're all highly interested on how we're going to make this work. I do want to change the screen here. Get that to happen. This way. Not that one. Okay. All right. All right, bear with me. We'll do it like that. So I'd like to thank our hosts, obviously, at DigiBC, and for having us, and again, to you all for joining us this evening after work. My colleagues and I are very pleased and happy to be able to lead this discussion around player monetization. Playnomics has designed an audience management tool that allows you to speak directly and uniquely to segments that matter within your game. For example, your VIP monetizers, your highly engaged players but not monetizing, or your interested players but with low engagement. Our patented PlayRM tool is the most intelligent player engagement tool for mobile and social games, and we'll explain why. We've designed the platform based on the notion that all players are not equal based upon their play patterns. However, we see like behavior amongst those play patterns and their attributes, and that enables us to predict what they're going to do next, their value in the game, using our campaign management tool, which is a targeted management tool that enables you to target any of these segments individually, simultaneously, at the right time to deliver the right message to the right players. We're committed to protecting the whales, if you will, to use that term, and the value of the monetizing players, and unlocking the value of what we all know is the majority of the player population, that 95%, if we're using a nice, warm, high number of 5% of monetizing players. I hope you guys are seeing 5% in this room on average. So to illustrate and highlight our thinking, I wanted to kind of start off with what I feel is a great illustration about not only how we think about using analytics and player data, but how others have also utilized it to their advantage and success. Some of you might be familiar with this.
There are rich teams, and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
That's $1, man.
What?
Welcome to Oakland.
I need more money.
We're not New York. Find players for the money that we do have.
I like the risk.
An ugly girlfriend. Ugly girlfriend means no confidence. You guys are talking the same old nonsense like we're looking for Fabio. We got to think differently.
Who's Fabio?
Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. In order to buy wins, you need to buy runs.
Who are you?
I'm Peter Van.
First job in baseball?
It's my first job anywhere.
Okay. The rest of the clip is actually quite great. I don't know if you guys will see it, but I'll stop there. Why did I choose this clip? The title? To kick off our discussion about monetization of mobile games? Well, because it's relevant to us. The current state of free-to-play games market right now is actually remarkably similar to the scenario that a team like the Oakland A's encountered in the 90s. This is a team that had a tenth of the budget for payroll for players versus some of the larger players and payroll against teams that are going up against. The central premise of Moneyball was based on the collective wisdom of baseball insiders, players, the front office, coaches, the management, over a century, literally, using statistics like stolen bases, batting average, RBIs that were typically used to gauge players, which is, again, a relic of a 19th century view of the game. And the film and the book, they portray that the Oakland A's front office took advantage, however, of a more analytic approach and gauge of player performance to fuel the team that could compete successfully. This is a Cinderella story and how that year that they did that. So, how did a team with a payroll a fraction of the size of its competition compete with the largest payrolls? Everybody said it's improbable, unlikely, against all odds, yet the reality was different. The Oakland A's and Billy Beane, which was the Brad Pitt character, they took the opportunity to innovate. They were bold and daring to not only question the effectiveness of the generally accepted measures and attributes to predict player performance, but they evolved it. And they saw a dramatic, tangible result to their bottom line. And I love the line that Jonah Hill states is, your goal should not be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. And the way you buy wins is to buy runs. Okay? And the central premise, well, perhaps more apropos tonight, would be the hockey reference of teams like the Canucks or the Rangers versus teams like the Phoenix Coyotes. Again, small bankroll, but how are they doing it? Our premise at Playnomics is that the collective wisdom of gaming insiders, not over the past century, but over the past 3 years, is outdated already. And we've adapted to focus on buying runs or engagement behavior. And by adhering to commonly accepted notions that the way to win free-to-play is scaling player population, buying players, upon initial release of your title, we find an environment that can be characterized by an unsustainable bubble economy. In fact, the current economics for publishing free-to-play titles in social and mobile are that 90% are unsustainable at the current rate. Overvalued metrics are leading to unsustainable growth and negative margin. We've got to look elsewhere. So this evening we want to present a discussion of what we at Playnomics believe is the next battleground for focus for game developers and publishers alike to compete to win free-to-play games. We've got our team of engineers, data scientists, and our Billy Beane, otherwise known as Chethan, the founder of Playnomics, and other friends, to have dialogue about recognizing and realizing an evolved approach to game to player and player-to-game interaction in order to build sustainable and profitable games. These guys will be lurking around. They're from product engineering. We want to give you demos afterwards, so please, you can see our audience management and engagement tool in action afterwards. They'll be lurking, but they'll be doing it nicely to discuss further with you. So to begin, I wanted to introduce a friend of mine, Alain Tascan. As Howard mentioned, Alain and I worked together for many years at Ubisoft in the mid-90s. I think Alain was one of the first 50 employees in Ubisoft in Paris. I was one of the 5th employee in Ubisoft in San Francisco. And he had a remarkable career in game production in Canada, building some of the world's largest and critically acclaimed studios, both EA Montreal and Ubisoft Montreal, solving complex problems, building technology-fueled and artistically driven experiences. But that's old news. Today, Alain is focused on solving new problems, like many of yourselves. And he wants to redefine the future of social games by building fresh and entertaining experiences. In fact, even tonight he told me that one of their newest games, Treasure Sprint, is coming out on iOS later today. So we'll be able to enjoy that later today. So I wanted to invite Alain up here and have him and I have a little bit of a discussion back and forth about how we've seen the progression from yesterday to today. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Alain. So, so you just released a fresh new slate of games
Yes.
over the past 18 months. Generally, what are the most important things that you're learning and seeing in the marketplace of the recent releases?
Well, I mean, it's scary and exciting at the same time. It's scare-sighting. I mean, the thing is that, I'm coming from the console game like we do. So we come here and we try to embrace this. And we hear, we heard for a while, it's about acquisition, retention, monetization. And even if we embrace it, it's not until that we really are in the business trying to see what does this mean. Acquisition, is it only about buying players? It's $1 to $4. You can use tons of tools to do that. Or is it to do like a game that is so innovative that people are going to adopt it widely? Or is it about partnering with somebody who's going to push your game? Our first partner was Zynga, and we used them to push our first game. Or is it about having a license? Whether it's a non-license like Marvel, Disney, etc. So you can see that already just in the acquisition, you have like 3, 4, 5 things that you can do to do the same type. About the retentions is the same. Are we pushing games and still buying, via the normal channel? Are we using the classical game loops to be able to hook somebody? Are we using old, Connex business type of technique like the casino game? Hooking you up to these kind of things? Or are we using virality competition that the network can enable? So again, this word retention that can be just the retention can be different things. And monetization, which is one of the trickiest one, is it like, how do I valorize? Alright? Yeah. So, this is my teacher usually for English. A virtual good. How much costs something that doesn't exist? So you can valorize time, you can valorize an object. Easier when the object exists in reality. People will buy, a sports car with a German name at a higher price with a sports car with a Japanese name. It's the same price to make it, but it's just the way it is. So I think the big learning, to go back to the question, is that there is not one rule. There is like several, variables, and you have to find the right one that's going to fit your initial idea or your specific game. This is what we still learn to do.
But what about when we, in growing over the years together, we had a similar problem not being able to compete on marketing budget with other players in the console space. Right now, cost per install makes abundantly clear. The giants, the social mobile giants, Grease, Chethan, they're marketing aggressively. They're purchasing above average rate per install. What is a small studio? I'm assuming you have unlimited resources, 5 players every time you release a title. How do you approach that? How do you think about it? What's your workaround?
Well, I don't have a solution that I can share the thinking. I mean, the one of them would be to partner. I mean, the easiest. I mean, what we're doing right now is like, listen, we need to convince people. I mean, besides if you have an incredible, innovative game that's going to pick up by itself, I think the best way is to put something out there as fast as possible, and just get the feedback. Just have the right tool to analyze, the analysis. I mean, to see the results when it's out there, and then with the result of this, going to see, somebody who's the financial, mean to help you project this, or a partner that's agree or something. I think if you, by yourself, you can have the meaningful data that will help you. And by the way, meaningful data can also mean that the game is not working for whatever reason. Go back to the drawing board. And in order to do that, you really need to be very humble towards that. And which is, we might talk about it later, but game designers are sometimes, they still think, even if you have thousands of people telling them something, that they're right and they're wrong.
Yeah, because on a traditional retail game, equates to a very singular, simple consumer decision, right? You want to go and buy the title. You buy the title, you're very happy. On free-to-play games, however, you don't see that. Because on the other hand, you have to develop a continuous relationship with the player.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to know is, how do you approach the prioritization of game design and marketing tactics, and core gameplay focus and an effective marketing system? How do you balance that in the studio? Again, with small teams, how do you think about this?
No, but trying to be smart. But I think this is, we're touching on something very important. If some of you, are some people coming from the console business in the room? Yeah? I mean, the console business, we've been used for a very long time to sell a promise of entertainment. And people were following your promise and what you were saying in the press for months, sometimes years. When we were doing Splinter or other games like this. And when people come to the store, by the way, they line up at midnight to buy your game at $60 or $70, and they're happy to do it. They have a smile on their face. And then, they check your promise and tell you, you were right, you were wrong, and then come back again, or they complain on the forums. But this is the world we were living in. Today, completely different contract you have with the player. Usually people, when they buy something on free-to-play, in what I'm seeing, they're not happy to buy it. So they don't feel good about, I have to buy it. It's like, they're making the face about it. I mean, I never smile when I buy something on a game. I'm like, it screwed me, but I need to do it. They screwed me, as Americans. So this is, I think, what we have to learn is like, how to maybe this is where the innovation can be. Turning this frustration that is working right now, frustration of, I don't want to lose time, I want to win this turn against this guy, into something more positive that we have right now. And turning this frustration into positive buy. I think we don't have a solution, but this is something I feel that with the right tools, we can dream more, and the people that will come with the answer of making you smile when you buy, like it is in a lot of different things, then I think we might monetize more than on the 3 or 5%.
All right, but you're doing 3-4% monetization rate, and you want to maximize player value. You got 96, 97% of the people who aren't paying. Where do you focus your attention? Do you focus it on the 3 or 4% or the larger number? And I'm feeling that a lot, you know, the tug is like nurture and cultivate and focus on those players exclusively, or you know, how do you balance that process?
I think, you know, I think it's a good follow-up question. And I feel that, and this is just me, back up with not a lot of things that I just my instinct. I think if you just focus on really squeezing the lemon on this, you know, whales, killer whales, I mean, sometimes there will be another name to name that, it's dangerous. I mean, it is not normal. I mean, I think there will be, it's better to make more people pay, means that your business will get healthier, means that your message is more accepted than to just, you know, completely, I mean, this is just me, just completely focus on these guys that are spending and sometimes overspending. You know, if you look at the casino type of games, as you know, some people can spend thousands of dollars on non-wager gambling game. What if someday, you know, the government say, you know what, it's like the casino, you know, you're doing something wrong here, you're using weaknesses in people, you have to put in your advertising, hey, you know, watch out, don't play this stuff. I mean, we're very close to that. And I feel that if you believe in gaming, like, you know, I do, I think it's a very high form of entertainment. I prefer to focus on ways and study the market in order to make more people feel it's okay and I feel good about buying, rather than saying, you know, the guy who's already like this at $1,000, let's squeeze $500 more from this guy.
So now we're actually, I'm not going to steal from the thunder for where we go in the conversation, but predictive lifetime value is something that actually we focus on and have built into our product. That way in the first 30 days, we will be able to tell you by segment, type of player, what the value of that player is at that point on an ongoing basis. So I hope that will help. Well, I guess lastly, you know, I put down, again, this is real world application. You know, I want to know from you guys what you're thinking about your studio. What lessons have you been able to take from console game design and compulsion loops and apply them or, you know, carry over into the free-to-play space? Is there anything? Is it entirely different motivation? I think you kind of alluded to that.
A little. I think there are two ways to see it. If you look at the heart or the meat core, because now it's called meat core, there's a lot of things that, you know, it's about empowering, it's about like, you know, deeper gameplay, it's about sometimes skill strategy. So here we can bring a few things. Then you have to adapt. Obviously, you don't focus on long intro and things like that, and you adapt to the format. So you have some tricks. You know, if you go on 3D and you're on a small screen, don't do small object because it's worth it. You know, if you do big cars or big tanks because it's better. Now on the casual side, which is, you know, the big business today, we have to unlearn everything because it's completely different. People play casual games to spend times in a fun way. I mean, so they don't have to be, they have to be challenged with very little. I mean, you have to, you know, it's more based on luck and things like it. So the answer is definitely, I think if you go on the mid-core, you have more things to be inspired with. If you go into the casual, you have to unlearn a lot of things because it's a different thing. And if you study for the last few years who has been the most successful so far in the world of mobile or social, these are not people from the console. These are people coming from the internet, investment banking, out of school, or just very smart guys that, you know, were doing this. And I feel now we see, you know, more and more people coming from the console because it's just a platform-enabled technology that, you know, we used in the console business. But I feel that, you know, it's starting to merge. But so far, I feel that it's almost an impediment to come from the console business rather than coming from a different one, because, you know, we come with a lot of heavy bag, like you said, we look young because we pay like a lot of money for cosmetics, but I do. It's we're getting old in this world. We're talking with a lot of preconceived idea of this gaming. And I think if you're younger, you just embrace the platform and the specification of the platform and are able to use it better. But one of the most important things, I'm not saying that because it's Playnomics, but what we learn is that yes, you have the core comes, and sorry to be wrong, but the core comes with the creativity won't be read in a spreadsheet or an analytics. The initial idea has to come from an instinct, a way to interpret, something that you have inside you and that you see. But you have to check it afterwards, with facts. And this is what's completely different. We have now tools to check if your instincts are right or if they're wrong. I'm an economist by trade, never used it in my life, and I thought I was never going to use it until now. And it's the same thing. The biggest economic theory, are just like instinct, formula that are then backed up with a lot of econometric elements. And I think that this is what I feel people should follow in order to be successful.
Well, that's awesome. And I want to thank you for sharing your insights. One of my favorite things, certainly about the industry, which has continuously amazed me over time, is the willingness of the games community to share our learnings together in an environment like this. And the reason I went to start this way with the presentation and discussion is that this is what is happening in real time in order to aid our overall progress together. And I'll take that as our segue to now introduce our Billy, our Chethan, take a deeper dive into maximizing player lifetime value and to sort of address, again, these real-world problems that we're seeing on the development, on the production, and on the creative side of the business. Something as a publisher, when Alain and I used to work together, I think I never had a way to check. We measured our success on how many units we sold in, and then could put goodbye, adios, see you later. And now I really have we're working in a much more collaborative fashion than ever before. So, Chethan, why don't you come on up and dive into playing Play RM.
Thanks, Jane. That's really good context. I like what Alain said about putting a smile on people's faces, which I think is kind of interesting because not many people think about monetization in a game that way. But that's the point. People are players and players are people. And what you want to do is actually think about who they are as people. And if you do that and you can figure it out and give them what they want, they'll give you their engagement, their time, their money, the whole 9 yards. That's what we believe. So actually I'm going to go back a little bit. Sorry about that. All right, so what I'm going to talk about a little bit is what we call adaptive marketing. That's sort of what we've named what it is we think we have here. It's a name that we made up completely and totally. So I'll have to explain to you what it is. All right. Before I do that, let me tell you a little about who we are at Playnomics. We started in 2009, actually. We started pretty early on when we saw games becoming free to play, when we saw them becoming real-time services where every interaction with the customer really mattered. And we actually were not from the game space. We were economists and bankers and bioinformatics people by trade, but we played a lot of games and we loved games. And we kind of hated the way we were being treated in a lot of these games. Treated completely the same. Trying to be forced into monetization loops we didn't care about. And we wanted to play games that we actually liked because we remembered games that we loved. We remembered games that put a smile on our face. So we said, okay, well, the key here is with millions and millions of people in a game, how can you put a smile on each one of those players' faces all the time? And we thought the answer was actually using all the data that happens in the game to personalize the game experience. And in many ways, that's sort of what we think about when we think about adaptive marketing, is how do you personalize the game experience for each and every player to put a smile on their face. A little bit about us, we're venture-backed. Some of our great investors are in the audience here from Vantage Capital, another group called First Mark Capital, which did Riot's League of Legends. great game investors. We feel really lucky to have such support from such great investors. And our company has grown nicely. We, at this point, track over 100 million players. On a monthly basis, that's about 30 to 40 million unique players. So we see a lot. And we see a lot of data about how people play and what they do and how they interact and what gets them going. So we think we're starting to figure out how you can actually do what Alain was talking about, put a smile on each player's face. And so let me just skip to the point, the end of the whole presentation. What is the point of this thing we're calling adaptive marketing? And why should you, who are building interesting games and want to put a smile on players' faces, care? The answer is the top two lines right there. The top two lines are what happens when you use our system, or systems like this, to really personalize the experience for each and every player. And the bottom line is what happens when you don't. So we're seeing 3x, 4x spend, engagement, retention, from using this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's actually just marketing 101. It's really just segmenting an audience, figuring out what they're about, and delivering it to them. It's hard because there's millions and millions of players, and you have to do it continuously. But if you just think about it in that frame, which is, these are people too, I want to put a smile on their face, how do I do it? You can actually get results like this, and we'll just walk you through how that happens. All right, so we heard a little bit about the problems that are going on in free-to-play games. I'll just try to keep this brief and sum it up. It's pretty grim. Not only is it hard to find players, because acquisition costs have gone up dramatically and continue to go up, because folks like Zynga keep bidding up prices, Once you have those players, they don't stick around that long. We actually had data a couple of months ago that showed that across all games that we saw, something like 70 to 80% of players left after their first play session. So think about that. Spend all this time and money getting players, and then they're gone. And then you have to work to find the ones that are going to spend money in your game, and keep them around. This is a little hard to read for some of you in the back, but maybe you can see the screen back there if you want to see some of the fine print. We put out a study recently, again, across all the games we saw, around monetization in games. We hear in the industry it's 3 to 4 to 5%, and I think quality games are delivering that on a monthly basis in terms of who's spending money. Unfortunately, we saw something a little different. We looked at players who joined a game in the first 2 weeks of 2013, and then we tracked them for 3 months. And we just said, okay, how many of these people are actually going to spend money? And of all the players that joined, 0.77% spent money. I think that's better. Hold on. Of those 0.77%, the top 1% accounted for 32% of the total spend. The top 20%, now again, this is of just the people who spent money, accounted for 90%. So, put another way, 90% of the game of spend in these games we tracked came from 0.15% of the entire game population. So why does this happen? Well, I think my personal belief has a lot to do with the top of the funnel, which I think of as a mythical money tree. I would love to find this mythical money tree where game publishers have grown them in their backyard, nurturing the money tree, and then spending for installs. But those installs may never even actually play. But apparently everybody has a money tree, so they can keep spending and spending and spending. I'll tell you one thing, my wife would love this money tree. I'll think about it. I would love this money tree on behalf of my wife. So if any of the game developers in the audience have a money tree where they're continuously spending for installs, let me know. I would love to grow one of my own in my backyard. The problem is actually when you spend for installs, you don't do anything afterwards. You're just spending to get someone to install and maybe play your game. Maybe. But as we saw in some of the statistics I showed you, 90% of the audience, 80% of the audience, 70% of the audience, they leave after that first play session. So I think an over-focus on acquisition, the top of the funnel, has led people to this dismal situation of anemic monetization in games. The second thing is actually going to be a little surprising for some of you guys because we are a company that believes in deep analytics and that does comprise the heart of our system, but at the same time, we kind of hate analytics. I mean, I looked it up in Webster's dictionary. Analytics means a logical system of analysis, which to me is like life. I'm walking down the street, I see a red light, you know, I can't cross the crosswalk. I've logically deduced, I'm not going to cross the crosswalk. Great, I've made my decision. The problem is that people think it's going to solve everything. So, this is actually an excerpt from an analytics system for games. Session frequency. The top line is for people who played once. The lines below are people who played 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So I'm going to look at this and spend an hour looking at this and be like, okay, that means that lots of people played once, less people played twice, even less played 3 times, even less played 4 times. Great. So what? But now I spent days and days and days looking at information without any ability to actually do anything. And I think the last piece of it is that everybody spends so much time thinking about acquisition and how to get people into their game because they want those big numbers. They spend so much time looking at numbers and metrics that may have nothing to do with how actually to move the needle in their game. And they completely forget that one size fits all doesn't work in any situation, in any industry in the history of the world. So if you're offering a promotion to everybody, out of your entire audience, maybe one person wants it, but everybody else may not. And again, you know, not to put too fine a point on it, but we really believe at the end of the day, we're all game players because we're all people, and we're all people because we're game players. And there are many, many dimensions to what makes someone interested in the game. And there's many dimensions in what makes people unique and different. You can think about them in terms of their lifetime value. Jay and Alain talk about that a little bit. It's hard to understand what lifetime value is. That's also very multidimensional. It changes over time. It's hard to predict. You can think of them in terms of psychographics. Is someone really competitive? Are they really social? You can think of it in terms of the incentives they respond to. Do they want gifts? Do they want viral invites? But all of this means that, fundamentally, players are people. And yet, myself as an avid mobile and social game player, get treated like an object, a commodity. I don't want to be treated like a commodity. I'm a human being. I'm Billy Bean, apparently. Or Brad Pitt. Even better. All right, so here's what we saw. And I'll go back a couple years to show you like our aha moment. We were working with a great social gaming company out of New York called Large Animal Games. I don't know if some of you guys know those guys, but they're just phenomenal people. They had a game called Bumper Stars. It's a simple pool billiards mechanic. You know, you pull that little thing in the middle there, it bounces around, and you earn points. Pretty simple. So we said, okay, what's going on inside this game? Let's see if we can figure out what people are about by how they play this game. So we did some really interesting clustering of users. We looked at a lot of data, and we'll have our data scientist, Burke, come up after this and dive into how that actually happened. But what we found was actually something pretty interesting. In a super simple game, we found really complex human emotions. So it's a little hard to see from back there, but let me try to quickly summarize it. On the left is total number of credits versus number of friends. And so you see this massive blue group here. Got a lot of friends, but not that many credits. But there were a huge amount of players in the game. Now, coincidentally, this is also when Facebook was allowing people to spam their friends, more and more game invites, blah, 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 blah. So this game had a ton of people in it that seemed really social, but actually weren't playing that much. There was another group here, that little green group on the left there. No friends, but a lot of credits. Really kind of competitive. And if you look at the right view, which is the same groups shown a little bit differently, those guys got a lot of credits per week, but they actually didn't play that much weekly. And they had no friends because nobody wanted to play with them, because they were really not very friendly people. They just wanted to destroy the other person. The only people they would play with are other players who wanted to destroy the other person. And then there was this red group. This red group was kind of all over the place. So we looked at it and said, okay, well, they have some friends. They seem okay about the game. If you look at it in the second view, those guys actually don't do well at the game in terms of numbers of credits per week. But they keep coming back for more and more and more. And then we looked at their actual activity patterns, and we're like, wow, these guys go, and they literally want to get every single item that's released. They want every limited edition item. They want to explore every nook and cranny of the game. They're collector types. And then we did some testing. because all this is nothing without some real testing. So we took those competitors, and we said, okay, we think you're competitive, but compared to the rest of the audience, let's put a tournament notification in front of you. You're going to have to use virtual credits to get into this tournament, which means basically you have to pay to get into a tournament. And then look what happens. The blue group are the competitors, the green group are everybody else in the audience. Just a spike. The competitors paid a ton to get into a tournament, to beat the other people they knew were also competitive. Why? That's what they cared about. As human beings, that's what made them want to play the game. The rest of the audience could care less because, as you saw, there were people who were kind of social or collectors or explorers. Their motivations had nothing to do with being competitive. But for us, this was our aha moment. We're like, wow, is that literally a 10x response rate because we put something personalized in front of the right person at the right time? And that led us to believe something that we think is actually not revolutionary, but we feel the way we're doing it is quite revolutionary. That players are very, very different. And the point is that over time, in a game, you have to continuously figure out, with millions and millions of users, what is it that they want at every step of the life cycle in the game. And then give it to them, and continue to do it over and over and over again. So, it's cut off a little bit at the top there, sorry about that. But when I talk about adaptive marketing, I think the way to think about it is, it's the right message for the right person at the right time. In game parlance, what Alain and Jay were talking about, the people who are spending money, be it 0.15% or 5%, nurture them. Figure out what they need, give them more. Everybody else, they're actually cost. They're a cost on your game. You spend money acquiring them, and now all of a sudden, they're still in your game, and they're not spending any money. What you have to do is actually show them something different. Probably things like third-party ads. Of course, the challenge is figuring out all those three pieces. Right person, right message, right time. How can you do it with millions and millions of people? So as we look at people in a game, we can break them up into many, many different types of buckets, and depending on the type of game you have, some of these are very relevant and some of them are not. Depending on the moment of the week that your game is in, some of these could be very relevant. It could be around where people are in the entry funnel. Are they at day 14 or day 30? It could be on whether they're VIPs. Have they monetized recently? Once a VIP, always a VIP? Maybe. Maybe because they spent once, you've got to continuously cater to them. Maybe they'll never spend again. Maybe it's the milestones they've gone. Maybe you believe, hey, you know, they got level 5, they're stuck in my game forever. I need to get them there. It could be things that you're trying to predict. You're trying to predict when someone's going to leave because you got to get in front of them before they actually leave. It could be things around location. We just think there's so many different ways to think about the right person. That's part of the reason why monetization has become so anemic in games. Not to throw another wrench in it, but we haven't stopped ourselves at Playnomics trying to figure out the personality of how and why people play. I won't spend too much time on this. Brendan's actually going to deconstruct this a little bit, but we actually came up with a player map of why and how people play across personality types. And it's not that everybody here is either one of these categories or the other. It's that everybody is all of these categories, depending on the game they're in, depending on the moment of time. And we're all multidimensional. But Brendan will tell you a little bit more about the data science behind it. Right person is hard, the right message is hard. Think about all the channels you have to actually get the right thing in front of the right person. It can be content, it can be as simple as a tutorial, it can be a price discount, it can be a reward, it can be a free item. And then you have to figure out where to put it. In a push notification, in an email, in the game itself. When do you do it in the game? Is it after a level? Is it before a level? And don't forget, on the left, all those different personality types and player types, different types of people. Right message is hard. Let's not even talk about right time, because each of those player types and personalities and messages then have to be delivered at exactly the right moment when someone is in the right part of the funnel. So if I'm a monetizer, the right time to show it is probably when I've recently monetized, but maybe it's also a week afterwards when I put my wallet away. But that's hard to figure out. And again, we think that's why, if you deconstruct what's happening in games, that is why monetization rates are so low. Here's the self-serving part. We've actually made it easy. There's a little robot. That's our player RM robot. Friendly little guy. You open up his head, there's all this crazy stuff. So in order to solve this problem, we thought, okay, to deconstruct right person, right message, right time, you need to have real, deep, real-time data mining. You need to be able to segment the audience continuously. You need to be able to track players as they move from segment to segment, because one day someone can be very loyal, the next day they can be leaving. You need to be able to predict what someone's going to become. If you can get ahead of someone and figure out that they're going to become your most valuable customer before they even know it, you can start catering to them, and you can nurture them more effectively than ever before. And you need to be able to group people so that rather than talking to one person out of your millions of people every time, you're talking to maybe hundreds or thousands, but it's the same type of people. So now you can start to put the same incentive in front of groups and see how they respond. So, a little bit on how we did it, and again, I'll let Brendan, our data scientist, dive into some of the juice here. But we didn't come from games, we came from a completely different background, which is things like finance and bioinformatics and information security. So we looked at it and we said, well, you know, there's already a good system out there that helps people understand value and predicts value. It's called a credit score. Everybody has a credit score. A credit score maps to variables like how much money you've taken out, how quickly you're paying off your loans, how much your credit cards are overbalanced or underbalanced, and it changes all the time. And it's sort of the projection of value to a creditor of what you're worth. It's also a little bit predictive. It tells the creditor where you're going as well. So we said, let's do exactly the same thing. Let's get every single player in a game a score. And let's do it across a bunch of different dimensions. Things like attention or loyalty. In this case, loyalty is regularity of play, return rate, how that's changing, how it's increasing or decreasing. But let's not have people stare at a diagram. Let's just automate it so they can look at a number. What's the number going to do? Well, the number is going to allow us to group people in very, very like-minded segments. So now we can take all these people who have similar scores. In the credit score analogy, it's someone who's very creditworthy and is ready to buy a car. But we can treat them very similarly, and treat different groups differently. So highly engaged players now are grouped together. The nice thing is about these scores is that they map to how people change. So say I'm highly engaged one day and the next day I stop playing and my play pattern changes, I would drop out of that group because my score would change. And that's exactly what happens in credit scoring. You drop out very quickly from being a likely good target for credit for a car. But that's what we built. That's the inside of our system, is the ability for each player to get scored across multiple dimensions and then grouped. Because then you can talk to them. The types of segments that we give people, it's actually almost infinite. We've built what we think of as almost an infinite segmentation engine. All of the segments that we spool up can actually be combined, they can be customized, they can be things around retention, where somebody is in the life cycle, or in your first 30 days. Are you newly engaged, which is a prediction? Your play pattern looks like somebody who is highly engaged and has been in the game for 2 months. You're only in it for 3 days. Wow, you may become the best customer in this game, and you're only in it for 3 days. Let's get ahead of that and talk to these people. It can be things around monetization, whether someone has spent recently, whether they're predicted to spend, geography, behavioral stuff like how loyal somebody is. All of that is possible based on the technology we built because, again, we're looking at each individual player, we're dynamically saying, this is what you are at this moment in time, and then we're grouping you. Great, you've grouped somebody, but now you need to put the right message in front of them. So the next thing we did is we said, okay, how do we make this dead simple? Make this dead simple because with millions of players, it can't be hard. And the last thing you need to do as a game developer is worry about your monetization curve and whether someone's seeing the right message. So let's automate that. Let's just make it automated so that the right message will be shown to somebody based on whatever segment they're in. And then we allow you to actually build that on the fly and literally just drag and drop it over. So for every segment you saw, you can literally go ahead, drag and drop some creative, do it once for your game, and never have to touch it again. And as someone goes and is in their first 3 days, they can see a certain promotion. Once they become highly loyal and monetized, they can see discounts. Now they're at risk, they can see the next game in your portfolio. We're trying to automate it so that people don't have to worry about it. Because that's the hardest part, is worrying about it and looking at data and doing it over and over and over again. By the way, these are just static screenshots There's a bunch of lurkers back there with Playnomics hoodies. They don't usually see the light of day. We've let them out. They'd be happy to give you a demo of the system. It actually looks really, really cool. One other thing we've done recently is all this targeting we thought was really cool in game, but people have mobile phones, so we said, well, why not do behavioral push and let people talk to different segments using push notifications. You can even have a customized sound for your highly loyal players versus your at-risk players. But the key is to do it again and again, and to continuously adapt. And this is the only part of the pitch where I'll say the analytics are really important. Because you want to see what works. You want to tweak it. You want to do it again. We can help you do that. We can help you automate it. But the point is you should do it. You should do it because you'll figure out a lot about who these people are. And then the last piece, which is the right time. We've spent a lot of time figuring out for every game genre and every game mechanic and every game incentive, what is the right time to show something to somebody? Day 14, non-monetized social slot player. I'm sure a lot of people here have slots games that they've been working on. What do you need to put in front of somebody at day 14 when they haven't monetized to increase retention by 10%? That's what we're deconstructing, and we have playbooks that we'd be willing and happy to give to everybody in this room, and in fact the industry, because we want this to get out there. But the point is that you have to think about timing as well. So, first day 7 players, we've seen an amazing uptick in loyalty and engagement if you show them a quick tutorial. This tutorial, by the way, is just, did you know that the ice fists kill all blue monsters? But how would someone know that? You have the ability to tell them. You have the ability to cater to them and get them through the game to the point you want them to get to the game. Reach outside of the game. Use ad targeting to get people back in after they've installed. Lots of apps out there, lots of games out there. You know, day 7, they may not come back. Talk to them outside. There's many ways to actually do this, not using Playnomics technology, but again, we've made it simple and easy, so we prefer you use ours. Reward loyal players to influence engagement. This is, we missed you, try a new monster suit. Whales, that 0.15% who spend 90% of the dollars. Encourage a recent monetizer to spend again, right after they spend. You've opened up your wallet, you spent. Wait a second, here's something else, and oh, by the way, I know you spent, so I'm going to give you a discount. Oh, okay, maybe I'll buy it again. And then everybody else. Everybody else that's not doing anything for you in your game. We really believe, actually, the future is ad targeting. And you know, ads has sort of a dirty reputation inside games. But the truth is, it's bad because it's not targeting. It's bad because everybody's seeing the same message. If you're a mobile-engaged mom or an urban male who's an early adopter of technology, you shouldn't see the same ads. But that's what's happening right now. And we're trying to change that, actually, using exactly the same type of data we talked about for the games, but giving it to the brands and the advertisers so they can say, oh yeah, I want to get one mobile-engaged mom from this game, one over here, one over here, one here. And the end result is, for a player, they actually get something that matters to them in terms of a reward, an incentive, an ad. And for you, the game publisher and developer, you actually get money coming in your game for everybody else who's not spending money. But you'll be able to know that the ads are only being shown to the people who are not monetizing. I mean, that's the key, right? Don't get in the way of your monetizers. Don't get in the way of the people who are predicted to monetize. Show ads to everybody else. Maximize their player value over time, continuously. Right message, right person, right time. Okay, so let's go back to the end, the beginning of the presentation, which is kind of the end. We were asked by a social casino company to predict early spenders as a segment and then unlock that spend. All we did was create a segment of early spenders using our technology. And then we put 2 incentives in front of those early spenders. And we carved out a control group. One incentive was 50,000 free chips. The other incentive was 100,000 free chips. And that's what happened. Actually, it's kind of interesting because that control group you see at the bottom, $40 a spend per player, that's actually the control group of early spenders. There's another line that's not even on here, which is everybody else in the game that spent $10 over their lifetime. So not only were we able to predict who was going to spend early, we then were able to unlock that spend. And the crazy thing is this campaign lasted for 5 days. Right here. 5 days. Those 5 days of putting these promotions in front of people, that red group went up like a firecracker. And they stayed up. They actually continued to spend more and more and more. We unlocked the spend continuously just by showing one promotion for 5 days. Those guys spent $120 over time. The last side note is that that group, that red group, actually was shown 50,000 free chips. They were actually shown less than the top line, which is the purple group, which actually spent less, was shown more. So there is some interesting nuances there about not giving too much to people, just giving them enough so they feel like, okay, I've got the start. I can do it myself now. So, to sum up, we think the problem is anemic monetization. I don't think anybody can argue with that. 1%, 0.15%, 3%, still not very good. And we think adaptive marketing is the answer. Why? Number one, it's been happening for 5 years. People have been spending on users. It hasn't worked. Time to stop thinking about acquisition. It's time to start thinking about what happens after you acquire somebody. Oops. Number two, you have to continuously get value out of people. And it sounds kind of economics, and I too was trained as an economist, never thought I'd actually use it. But it maps to, I think, putting a happy smile on someone's face. If you can put a happy smile on your player's face by giving them what they need at that exact moment in time when they're playing a game, they get stuck and they get a reward and it gets them going, they'll be loyal and they'll be engaged. But again, millions and millions of people, all with their own value, all changing all the time. It has to be done automatically. So we believe that our solution is the answer here. We think you can do it yourself. It's just hard. But no matter what, you have to do it continuously. You have to think about it, and think about post-acquisition. Now you have people. People are human beings who have dreams and interests, and they like your game. What are you going to do? So, again, I don't want to make this seem like a complete Playnomics commercial, just 60%. Brendan Burke, who is one of our data scientists who runs our group called Play Science, is going to be coming up. What Brendan's going to talk about is the dark arts of data mining. Everybody hears about data mining. Data mining, all our NSA phone records in the US, probably here too. But Brendan's going to try to demystify that a little bit. He's going to demystify it by going deep into what it actually means and how you should actually do it and how you should approach it. So again, I think everybody in this room should use our system, but I'm the CEO and co-founder of this company. If you want to do it yourself, you should listen to how Brendan has approached this, because he spent time not coming from the game industry. He was actually a bioinformatics PhD student at Stanford. And now, he's in the game industry, but he's used what he learned in bioinformatics, he used what we learned in information security and finance, he applied it to the game industry, and what he's going to do is give you sort of a playbook for data mining that hopefully you can use if for some reason after this you don't want to use our system. For some strange reason. You can use Brendan's thinking to kind of frame how you use data to get to this point of automated adaptive marketing. Thanks very much. Before I bring Brendan up, one quick thing to note. We're also going to break out right now if you guys want to ask some questions. For those of you who don't want to go deep on the data mining, data science side and want to start drinking, feel free to go to the other room. Some of the Playnomics team will be over there. Anybody wearing a hoodie can give you a demo, can answer any questions you have. If you sign up for our system on our website, if you say that you came and saw the system at DigiBC, we'll actually give you some free stuff when using the system, and the team can tell you all about that. All right, Brendan, let's go.
So as Chethan mentioned, I'm the data science nerd. In the Moneyball analogy, came from a statistics background, as Chethan mentioned. I have only been in the games industry for 3 years. I was actually studying viruses and viral evolution before this, and now I study games and gameplay products and users who use them, which I guess makes the users like viruses. Hopefully not. But before I launch in, I just wanted to get a quick show of hands because I now work in this kind of nexus between game designers, and game delivery people who tend to be very creatively driven, and business intelligence people and data scientists whose job it is to take all of those creative ideas and translate them into mathematical models. How many people actually in the audience would consider themselves from the former group, just by a quick show of hands, of the creative game design, product delivery and product development around games, rough percentage? Okay, so a good sizable number. And in general, in whatever industry you're in, how many people would consider themselves more on the math side and analytics side and data analysis? That's good. It's a pretty good spread. It's great. Okay, so what I'm going to attempt to do, so I see this, I see our tool, I see our product from a slightly different perspective, probably than the guys who are out there selling it to game marketers, because it's ultimately a tool for game marketers to use. What I see in terms of what we've built is we build intuitive, data-driven machine learning tools that game marketers can use to automate responses to their games. And what I'm going to try and do is kind of provide a translation between those two in terms of what is the perspective that it takes to build a model that actually models users and their behaviors in games. So just as an example of that, when a game designer or a game manager wants to investigate all of their whales in their game, or all of their collectors, or any of these kind of intuitive conceptual terms, they go to the business development guy, or so they go to the business intelligence guy or the data science guy, and his job is to figure out a way to represent that in data on an ongoing basis. And so that's kind of the bridge that I see this from. Our product, to me, is a model deployment product. How do we model who a collector is? How do we model who a whale is in real time, such that based on a data stream coming in, our system can automatically make that determination based on a model and allow you access to a group that is called whales, so that you can act on them in real time. So to me, that's exactly what we do. Is we build. Our job is to build. Yeah. So our job is to build data-driven tools for online game management. And essentially is to apply the tool set that I'm used to using, which is this data science toolbox, to gameplay. And I do realize that I'm the data science guy who's standing between the audience and drinks or more drinks. So I'll try to keep the rest of this brief, but I want to quickly cover 3 areas. First is what are some models that we've built in the past? What are the ways in which we've taken those models and productized them and made develop them into an engineering stack that we can deploy to model other types of users in the future? And then what are all of the potential future ways in which we could extend that product and that platform to model future users? So as Chethan mentioned, I head up Play Science, and Play Science for us is kind of a collaborative R&D effort. It's a very business-facing and client-facing R&D effort. And what we were trying to figure out, and what we do is we work directly with game publishers to figure out what are the problems that they're trying to solve, what are predictions they're trying to make, and what are intuitive models that we can, and tools that we can put in the hands of game managers that will help them solve their game problems. And so intuitive to me started with something like prediction. Predictions are very intuitive. What is somebody going to do next? It's very actionable. It's a model that will allow you to get to say, this is what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. I better get out in front of it. So we started with a very simple problem, which almost everyone who's worked in predictive analytics in the games industry has faced, and probably in a lot of other fields as well, in e-commerce, for example, which is what are the players who are going to churn or leave? And this particular type of problem, in the parlance of an analytics person or a business intelligence person, this is a classification problem, right? We're trying to look at the data flow. What are the leading indicators of whether or not a user is engaged or not? And which will lead them to fall into, in the future, a group of users who are likely to return and come back and play, versus churn and leave completely, right? So my job was to take a data feed, go off, and figure out how do I model this. And what we ended up building was a classification stack. So we applied two different sets of algorithms. The first was an unsupervised learning algorithm, which is just a clustering algorithm. And clustering in intuitive terms is just looking at all of the users who have similar similar values for all of their data points, and separating them out into users who are the most similar along a given set of data points. So all the users who have the same number of logins per day, and the same number of hours spent in game per session, the same number of purchases made per week. All of those types of data variables that you could use to represent a user, we separated out users into groups, and we created a classifier around them. And then what we did is we looked at the users who had the highest values for all those might get stuck in another cluster. The users who had the lowest values for all those might get stuck in another cluster. And what we did is we trained a learning algorithm between those. So after we clustered them, we developed a training model, which is essentially a regression style model, which is trying to classify users into one of these two groups based on that data. So this is just the training flow stack. And so we take a data stream in, we build a classifier between them to determine users who are likely to be long play versus short play. And what that allows us to do is to take that classifier, take that regression model, apply it to all users that are coming in the future to determine whether or not they're going to fall into a long play or short play. Are they going to be a returner or a churner? That combination of clustering users, finding all the users who have similar values, creating classifications between those clusters in order to determine whether or not you're going to fall into one of two groups, is actually a very powerful and extensible system. And what we did is we took that system, we took those two components, and we productized them, and tried to make them intuitive. So, no, that's not it. I can show you the Moneyball. There we go. So what we did is we turned this into, we took those two sets of machine learning algorithms that we tend to work with, and we developed the clustering for us. We productized it as segmentation. These are all the users who have similar values along something that you care about. So all the users who have logged in on the same day, that could be a single variable along which you would cluster. That's called cohort analysis. You could take multiple variables, all of the users who tend to log in 10 times per day and spend at least 3 hours in terms of time on site. And any single variable or multiple variables that you wanted to use to represent a user group, we can take and represent as a segment in our dashboard. The nice part about our system is that it allows you to build very, very complex models where you are using lots of different variables to determine who goes into this group. But for the game developer at home who wants to build models that are similar to this as well, you can build single 2-variable clusters where you are determining all of the users, 50% of the users who return in week 2 spent above a certain amount of time in my game in week 1. And so therefore, I'm going to optimize my game to make sure that the maximum number of users falls into the cluster of above 5 hours of time on site spent in week 1. That's a very single variable way to build a future or predictive cluster of future return. The second thing that we did is we took the kind of multivariate analysis, the regression modeling, and we took that and we looked at the problem of game metrics, right? And you can take things like number of logins and all, amount of money spent and permute it in a million different ways. And for different games, different variables will matter. And we knew this building a platform, and we knew that it's difficult to actually get to the bottom of which variables matter the most to your game. And so what we did is we took that type of multivariate regression modeling approach and said, certain variables intuitively tend to be linked together, right? They tend to covary, things like number of logins per week and total time on site tend to covary along certain, for most games. So what we'll do is we'll group them together and create a score, a multivariate score that is specific to your game. It's essentially like grading your users along a curve. And all of the users have the most ideal login playing pattern, the most ideal time on site pattern, get assigned a score along that curve. And what you get out of that is 3 different subscores along engagement, which are essentially personalized to your game. So we look at attention, and attention is a score built around time on site, specific to your game, number of logins per day, essentially all of the intraday login patterns that your game is designed to elicit out of the user. It takes the ideal behavior and assigns all of the users who are in that ideal cluster a score of 100, and everyone else is graded on a curve down from there. A similar score is looking at loyalty. Loyalty for anyone who's worked in games is just return patterns, right? Return play patterns. You know, for some games, they're designed to get users to return every day during the first week, but maybe they churn out on day 30. Other games are designed to get you to return 2 to 3 times per week, but they may be a slightly more advanced game where the life cycle is not a month or 3 months, but is a year or 2 years in some cases. And so what we did is we took the ideal loyalty behaviors, the ideal login behaviors, and we grouped those again into a score. And then the final set of scores is looking at intraplay patterns. And again, this is another multivariate analysis. This is looking at what are the types of actions that a player is taking in game, and what is the frequency of those actions within a given session. And the place that this actually turned out to be the most interesting for differentiating users is between users who are, say, in a tournament and playing very, very frantically and trying to always make the right moves and have very, very fast twitch responses, versus users who might be playing a casual game on their second screen or on their iPhone while they're waiting for the bus or wherever it happens to be. We see real meaningful variance in how engaged a user is with their play in the game. That is a good future indicator of what their future return patterns and spend patterns are like. So those are just examples of ways where we've taken the stack that we built to build that initial churn prediction model, looking at clustering models, multivariate analysis, and we productized it as this type of individualized game scoring and advanced segmentation. Ultimately, though, the challenge in any data science situation is modeling the context that you have. And so the first intuitive way of giving game developers a way to manage their players in this very intuitive way was making things like predictions, where the people are going to churn in the next 2 weeks, spend in the next 2 weeks. That really only goes, there's only so many predictions that you can make that are relevant, and there are other things that you are likely going to want to represent in your users other than just a set of predictions. And what that turned out to be was modeling actually users and their interactions with your game. Games are very individualized. They deploy different types of mechanics that are designed to elicit different types of responses. And not everyone is always in the same state at the same time, right? Those states change. A churner is not always a churner. Likely monetizer is not always a likely monetizer. Whales, for example, are not always whales, right? There may be a user who has spent $2,000 in your game already, but you only have $2,100 worth of content. That user, with respect to your game, is no longer a whale. They may have reached the end of their life cycle because there's only $100 more that they can spend. So what we wanted to do was take it beyond this simple style of classification style algorithms and make it more dynamic, make it more self-updating, and make it more directly tailored to the types of decisions that you would have to make in your game. So how do we take this classification style stack and make it actionable? So what we did ultimately is we went back to the drawing board and said, what is this interaction between player and game? How does that work? What are the mechanics of it? What are we actually modeling? It's not all just players that are one type or another. And so when we were looking at games, we said, okay, there's the player who's sitting on their mobile phone or their console or their in front of their desktop, and then there's the game, which is usually on a server. And the interaction between these two looks something like this. The player takes an action that goes to the game. The game has to process that and send back information that makes the player take the next action, complete that loop. Right? And for Playnomics, we look at this as a state change problem, and this is a fundamentally different type of problem than classification. It's taking each action that you do and updating whether or not your state has changed. Are you still a monetizer? Are you still engaged? The fact that I sent you 10 friend invites in your first week You responded to the first 5, and that makes us think that you're somebody who's going to respond to them a lot, but maybe you've maxed out your friend list. We should be determining this on an updating and rolling basis, based on what the state changes between the player and the information coming back from the game. And Playnomics is uniquely positioned to analyze this. We analyze calls going in both directions. So as the action goes out to the server for the game, we get that information. As the game sends back information, we also get information around what information they're sending back to you. And what this gives us the ability to do is to build an entirely different set of, and what we basically decided is that we should, in all predictions that we make going forward, the interaction between this type of information should always be taken into consideration. So this allows us to build a very, very different style of model, which is a state change model, which is what did I do that got a player to continue to play? What was it that pushed them through this cycle? And so let's say that instead of just 2 states, churner or non-churner, I have 3 states that I'm trying to model. Are they in a state of flow where they're really engaged with my game and likely to come back? Are they frustrated because they hit a wall where they just can't get any further? Are they bored? Is it too easy for them? How can we make these determinations? And obviously flow is the one that we want to target. And so what we do is we layer on top of those 3 states. We're trying to make predictions about what state you're in based on what the actions are that you took. So we can take all of the mechanics that a game deploys. We can call them social or imagination-driven or achievement-driven. There's some. Thought I had a list of. No, there you go. So these are examples of different types of actions that a game could deploy. A win, a completion, or a good fortune win. Something like a gambling game. Social, did you offer the ability to share or to gift or to collaborate with another user, and some more imaginative interactions with that game. Something like a narrative-driven or the ability to create something within the game. What are the things that are creating differential flow between these states? And if we can determine that, we can figure out not only what the mechanic is, but also the play dynamic that was created by it. Were they engaged? Did they come back? Did they complete that compulsion? And based on that, what we've done, and what Chethan alluded to earlier, is we've started to build a psychographic map of what players respond to. What are the actions in games that players really care about? And if you can determine this, you can, of course, flip the equation, which is, if you know what their psychographic is, if you've already determined that they tend to respond to social invitations, or they tend to respond to tournaments, or they tend to respond to gifting, you can match that player with a game mechanic that will lead to the outcome that you want, which is players sticking around and spending more money. So what we did, and again, this is an intuitive framing for a much more complex problem, but we built what is a 3D map of player behavior. And so what we looked at, we tried to create things that could be modeled on a continuum. So things like, what is the response time of a user and what is their frequency and regularity and timeliness of responses to any impetus that you put out as a game. When you send out a message, do they respond immediately? If it's an appointment mechanic, are they there immediately when their 10 minutes is up to build the next thing? How fast is their response time? Are they very proactive about coming back to your game and interacting with it? Versus, are they very reactive? Are they players that take a lot of pushing to actually do something and interact with your game? How do they interact with the mechanics that your game deploys? Do they seem to move very, very quickly through a learning curve of very complex gameplay? Or are they players that tend to like to play more intuitive style of games where they are basically acting on instinct or winning based on luck? What is their ideal type of environment to be in and to continue to problem solve in a very specific way? And then the final one, we added this because games are going social. It's one of the main mechanics for creating virality and spread and organic spread of your games. Is what is the driver? Are they primarily interacting with your game? Or in some cases, we're seeing an increasing number of games where the game is really just an excuse to interact with your friends in kind of a made-up way. Things like draw something. It's not necessarily that competitive or, but it does give you this excuse to ping your friends back and forth, every 5 minutes. That is very, very addictive and very, very viral. So what we were trying to figure out is, what are they mostly interacting with? Do they care about the complexity of your gameplay? Do they care about how often the game pings them to come back and do actions? Or are they just there really to interact with their friends, or most of the things that they do driven by their interactions with friends? And so we took these 3 very intuitive axes, and there's a bajillion more axes that I could stick in this model, but for the sake of being able to visualize it, we stuck with 3. And what we got are these player types. Scientist, habitualist, politician, socialite, competitor and collectivist, and then strategist and soloist. And the ones on the inside are the players that tend to interact primarily with games for the purposes of interacting with friends, whereas the players on the outside are the ones who are interacting with the game primarily for the purpose of interacting with the game and the game mechanics itself. And so just some intuitive examples of how we built up from data to intuitive groupings of users, these psychographic groupings of users. Just wanted to go through and give a brief description of what these types might be. So what we were looking at is, in our network of games, what types of play interactions do players respond to? If they are primarily there to be to socialize and not really to interact with complex game mechanics, they tended to be grouped into this socialite group. If they were primarily there to interact with kind of intuitive, easy, time-killing, kind of the downers of games, things where you can just play it without really thinking about it, we call them habitualist players, and these are players who can pull the lever on a slot machine, or hit max bet 50 times in a row and never get bored, or 5,000 times in a row, as it turns out. Collectivists tend to be players who are there to cooperate with other players. So they are there to interact with the game, but it's there interacting with other players with the purposes of defeating this game. Foursquare was kind of an example of this. I think some of the more recent examples are some things like Kingdoms of Camelot, for example, on mobile, where you're getting together a clan and trying to ultimately dominate this world by organizing and taking care of the group that you're interacting with. Soloist games are the exact opposite of that. You're trying to dominate the games and the game mechanics, but you're trying to do it individually. You care about beating the high score. You're always checking the high score. If we send you a message that you dropped off the leaderboard, you come back and play another game to get back on the leaderboard. Competitor and strategists, again, similar, flip sides of the same social coin, or non-social. Competitors are players who respond to impetuses that come socially. If a player makes a move in a game like Words with Friends or in chess that puts up 50 points, that is their major impetus for coming back. A strategist is a slightly different player. They think, to the nth degree about very, very complex games and how they can deploy strategies that will most take advantage of mechanics that they're given in that situation. And then the final two groups, again, flip sides of the same coin, are politician and scientist. The politician group is intended to be, and we found this actually was the case in a few games, there are players who are in these games specifically to mess with other people. So it's not that they're there to, try and rally the troops and get them together and try to beat the game, but they really want to be there just to kind of needle people, and that's their primary reason for playing. And you can actually, measure those interactions by their lack of tendency to join clans, their lack of tendency to achieve, but they may do things like, challenge people who are lower than them on, the level scale, things like that. The scientists, again, is the flip side of that. They're not really there to achieve. When you send them, they may play a lot, they may play very complex games a lot, but they don't respond to things like leaderboard invites, right? What they respond to is trying to figure out everything that's going on in this game. What are all of the variations that potentially exist, and how can I explore every single one? So again, this is a way of taking this stream of data that we all have coming back from all of these games and organize them into intuitive groups to figure out who is actually in these games, who's playing them, And have I actually designed a game that appeals to the people that I think are playing it? And in a lot of cases, the population breakdown in terms of the people who spend the most money don't turn out to be the people that you think that they'll be. You know, like the collectivists, the people who are rallying the troops, people who are the leaders. Sometimes those are the guys who spend the most money, but often it's the politicians. It's the guys who are there to mess with other people. You know, like they're paying for the ability to seek revenge or to put together their troops as fast as possible. And so this again is a way of figuring out in a very granular fashion who are those users and how can I figure out what intuitive actions I should take in my game design to actually move it forward and advance my population and manage each of these players as though they are unique individuals. And that's it. That's all I got for you. I think I went a little bit over my intended time, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
These groups that you showed us, were they ranked by the priority of the numbers, or were they ranked by the popularity, the groups that you were showing us?
Oh, no, so they were, so we actually did a survey across a network of games at the time and figured out what percentages of users. So there was a little statistic at the bottom that said what percentages of users turned out to be in each of those categories. And there actually were some surprising returns in that. But they're not really intended to be ranked. Like the highest spending or the most important group in one game may be a different group in another game. Yeah.
Let's say that a company has their own analytics team, or the designers are able to run their own queries on their current player base. Saying that you've gone through hundreds of thousands, millions of players, do you log any of them and offer, say, player acquisition? Is that a service that you offer? Say I wanted players that I'm not looking for whales, but I'm looking for people who say share virally the most, because I want to build a player base before I start trying to capitalize on players that I basically don't have.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So the answer in general is yes. When we started, that wasn't intended to be a core part of our business. We viewed this as an audience management and really customer relationship management platform. Where we were helping to optimize that 5%. Because of the nature of this space and the fact that it is freemium, and in every game that we're in, 95% of the players don't spend money. What we have started doing is segmenting that 95% of players that may not spend in one game and brokering exchanges within our network based on what their likelihood is to spend another game. And we've done those on an individual basis, and we're actually pretty good at identifying and making predictions about who is most likely to jump from one game to another and then spend money. That works particularly well for very high ARPU games, where you're taking users maybe out of a casual aggregator where they've played every tower defense game in there, and you're saying, well, maybe based on that they'd like to try a first-person shooter that's slightly higher quality. We do custom campaigns based on that type of analysis, but UA isn't currently our core focus. Yep.
Just one small, quick follow-up question to that. As someone who, say I have a ton of daily active users, and I want you to run some analysis on my player base for me.
Yep.
What assurances do I have that you won't just take all my user IDs and then sell them to a competitor?
So all of those exchanges are brokered, so we don't do that unless you actually opt into the data network. And the only reason that you would do that is in order to sell players or to buy players within our network. Up until the point where you actually opt into an exchange like that, all of your data is siloed. Yeah.
I was just wondering, how many players does a game need before this kind of analysis makes sense?
It's a good question. So I tend to say that in games thus far, we try not to run an analysis on less than 10,000 players, which tends to be a pretty good beta audience. It's a good place to start. As those behaviors start to resolve out. So we can start with very, very early games that are still in beta. Not all of these groups may not necessarily resolve, and they may not necessarily resolve depending on what type of game you have, but in general, if you have about 10,000 players, we can start to produce pretty good segmentation. Yeah.
for kids, and one of the big challenges that we have is the act of COPA.
Yep.
We can't really mine and gather all the COPA data.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, with respect to all the data and the services that Playnomics offers, does it also apply to children below 14?
Yes, absolutely. So what we've done in general is we've stayed away from any personally identifiable behavior. So everything that we're modeling is essentially, it's much more like modeling what did they respond to, what type of content do they like, and making recommendations based on that than it is about tracking individual users and their propensities. So we actually work with companies like Nickelodeon, a bunch of different divisions of Viacom that have COPA compliance issues. We have a specific product and integration set called Playaround Junior, which solves those issues. So we don't do things like track emails or we make sure that that information is never logged anywhere, even if it's offered. In other cases where that information is, for games that are don't have COPA compliance issues, if that information is offered, we may log it. But there is no personally identifiable demographic, Facebook, any of that kind of information required to be sent to us in order to build the models that we do. Yep.
I assume that the player types that the 8 player types emerge and you just observe them.
Yes.
But they map out pretty much what Bartle came up with, the 4 player types. What's your comment on it?
Yeah, so from a marketing perspective, the reason that we arranged the groups in the way that we did visually was because it maps to something intuitive that people are already familiar with, which is Bartles. This map the difference between this though is that this map was built based on in-game action data, not based on survey data about what users' reasons for playing are. So we're actually able to map all users in that 3D space based on data, right? It's based on comparing every user to every other user that plays a specific game. We can place them in that 3D map based on the actions that they take. So the presentation is actually designed to mirror Bartle, but the data underlying it in the model is actually very, very different.
So it's not an indication that Bartle would be right, it just happens.
No, I thought it would actually be interesting to build genre-specific models. So this is a cross-genre model, right? And the broadness of the categories indicates that. It might be interesting to take all MMOs and see if we could validate those in data as well. That's something that I've had in the back of my head to do, but haven't actually done. So it doesn't necessarily indicate that, but it would obviously be interesting to see if we could do it.
I assume something that's very important is actually categorizing the games based on those player types. How do you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, so this is another. So we have a benchmarking system that we've built and are continually refining it. We're actually refining it based on feedback from developers, where we've taken game mechanics, number of levels, number of items involved in your store, right? And we started with very high level categories, and then what we've tried to do is figure out, in that type of psychographic space, how close are 2 different types of games, right? Are fighting games and first-person shooters, are those actually very, very similar and appealing to very similar types, or are they vastly divergent on that scale? That's something that we're still working on, but we do have an internal genre set that we started with that we are continually updating and validating based on data. So that's one of the things that that if you sign up, we may ask you to participate in is that survey, and it's just filling out a bunch of different questions about rating things like graphics and narrative and how important they were to your game design, and then comparing the engagement and monetization numbers that we get out of that to the rest of our network in order to benchmark properly. So benchmarking and having that be very, very accurate is very important to us. Yep.
What's the kind of data bandwidth that you guys are handling today? Like, what's the maximum amount of load you guys can take in terms of the sheer amount of data that you're taking into these kinds of models?
Yeah. So our data stack is very elastic. I think it can handle currently up to something like 50,000 calls per second, something like that. And we're not using anywhere near that much currently. And it's all parallelized in Hadoop. So we're all we really have to do in order to handle additional load is pull up additional machines, and that we haven't run into any issues thus far. In terms of running actual models, though, there are differences in terms of the speeds in which those models run. And so what we've done is we've deployed a stack where very complex models that may actually need to run over, especially if you have a large user population, they may have to run for a period that's longer than 24 hours, right? And that's very obviously not a rapid response real-time system. So what we do is we run those models not offline, but we run them behind the scenes. We produce what are actually prior probabilities for given predictions, and then we use a very different set of low latency algorithms to update those predictions in real time. So if the actions that came in a given day changed a given prediction, we're able to use just a day's worth of data to update that prediction rather than looking at the entire history of the user set. Does that answer your question?
More or less, can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the turnaround time between in-game action to update the set?
So for making predictions, we currently load new predictions every 4 to 6 hours. So it's 4 to 5 times a day. For predictions based on single events or trigger things like things that aren't predictive, like a tutorial, for example, we're working to make those real time, which is a switch. A lot of game developers currently do that, within their game logic. If you complete the tutorial, you see this pop up, and then we're able to populate that based on psychographics or predictions or that kind of thing. So we'll move in that direction. But currently, the latency is about on predictions specifically, it's about 4 to 6 hours. Yep.
Yeah, so let's say I'm using your tool, and you've given me some information about a certain type of engagement, like this user is a soloist or they're highly engaged. Do you give clients the ability to look at like the underlying features and sort of like what's the most predictive features in each of those categories, so that they can make decisions sort of based on their game?
So all of the data is yours, and we can feed that back to you. So we'll feed back our prediction, our categorization, our cluster, as well as any variables that you ask us to. We can output that in the form of a CSV. What you'll see is for the automated reports that we have in our dashboard, the things like the attention, loyalty, intensity scores, or monetization scores. What we bubble up are actually bubble up 3 key variables for your game that were produce the highest lift in that in terms of classifying that distribution. So that you'll see in the dashboard, but you won't see necessarily all of the metrics that you might care about. That obviously also is customizable, but any data that you want access to is yours to own. So we can, on very short turnaround, output CSVs on any model that you